You are standing in the kitchen at 9 at night, the fridge humming, your stomach growling, and there is nothing in the cupboard that feels like a snack. So you almost reach for your keys to go buy a bag of something that costs $5 and disappears in 10 minutes. Stop. Because 100 years ago, families with far less than you had snacks every single night, and they spent almost nothing to do it. I know that sounds impossible in a world where a small bag of chips cost more than an hour once did. But I learned these tricks from people who lived through real hunger, and once they showed me, I never looked at an empty cupboard the same way again. I was broke for a long stretch of my life, the kind of broke where you count coins on the counter and come up short. And the woman who taught me these things had lived through the 1930s, when a nickel had to feed a family. Before this video is over, I am going to hand you a snack that soldiers carried in their pockets in the 1860s that keeps for months without a refrigerator, and that costs you pennies a handful. It works whether you have a full pantry or $3 to your name. So stay with me because the last one changed how I eat when money is tight. Let me take you back to the first thing she ever showed me, because it is sitting in most kitchens right now, and almost nobody uses it the way she did. Popcorn. Now I know what you are thinking. You think popcorn is that overpriced bag you throw in the microwave, or that tub at the movie theater that costs more than the ticket. But that is not popcorn. That is a costume they put on popcorn to sell it back to you at 40 times the price. Real popcorn, the loose kernels in a jar, is one of the cheapest foods a human being can buy. When I did the math on it a few years back, a single serving of popped corn from loose kernels came out to around 10 cents. 10 cents. And here is the part that stopped me cold when I first learned it. During the Great Depression, popcorn was one of the few businesses that actually grew. While banks were failing and grown men were standing in bread lines, popcorn sales went up because it was one of the only treats a poor family could still afford. A 5-cent bag of popcorn was a luxury a father could still give his children when he could give them nothing else. That is not a fun fact. That is survival wisdom hiding inside a snack you already know. But the old folks did not just eat it plain from a bowl in front of the television. That is where we lost the knowledge. The woman who taught me poured fresh, warm popcorn into a bowl, covered it with cold milk, and added just a little sugar, and she ate it with a spoon like cereal. They called it popcorn cereal, and it was breakfast for a lot of children in the 1930s. It filled you up, it cost almost nothing, and it used the same box of popcorn that could be dessert that same night. One cheap ingredient, 2 meals, no waste. And she taught me to pop it the old way, in a heavy pot with a spoonful of lard or oil and a lid, shaking it over the flame so nothing burned. The taste is completely different from that microwave bag. It is nuttier, it is real, and it does not leave that greasy chemical film on your fingers. I timed it once. From cold pot to full bowl was under 4 minutes, and it cost me less than a quarter to feed 2 people. Once I understood that 1 jar of kernels replaced a whole shelf of snack bags, I started to wonder what else I had been overpaying for my entire life. And the next thing she showed me made me angry, because I realized how much I had been throwing straight into the garbage. Bread. Specifically, old bread. Now, everybody in my house used to do the same thing you probably do. The loaf goes a little stale, a little hard, maybe the heel is left over, and it goes in the trash or out to the birds. I did it for years without a second thought. But to the generation that raised the people who raised me, throwing away stale bread was almost a sin, because stale bread was not garbage. Stale bread was the beginning of the best snacks they had. Here is what I did not understand. Stale bread is not spoiled bread. Spoiled bread has mold, and you throw it out. Stale bread has simply lost moisture. And losing moisture is exactly what you want when you are about to make it into something crisp. The old cooks knew this in their bones. There is a whole family of recipes in the household manuals from the 1800s and the early 1900s, built entirely around bread that has gone hard, because a spending culture had not yet convinced people that food has to be fresh from a package to be worth eating. The simplest thing she made was cinnamon toast, but not the sad version. She would take that hard bread, spread a thin layer of butter or even bacon grease, sprinkle sugar and cinnamon, and put it under the broiler or in a hot, dry pan until the sugar turned into a crackling glaze. That hard, stale slice that I would have thrown away became a hot, crisp, sweet snack for the price of a slice of bread and a pinch of sugar, pennies, and it tasted better than half the boxed cookies I used to buy. But she went further than that, and this is the trick I use the most to this day. She turned stale bread into crackers and croutons that I now actually prefer to the store kind. You cut the hard bread into cubes or strips, toss them with a tiny bit of oil, and whatever seasoning you have, salt, garlic powder, a little dried herb, and you bake them low and slow until they are dry all the way through. What comes out is a crunchy snack that keeps for weeks in a jar. I have a jar on my counter right now that started life as the ends of loaves I would have thrown out. That is a snack I built out of garbage, and it cost me nothing because the bread was already bought and already paid for. Now, here is where I have to be honest with you about something, because it is the thing that made me stay up thinking, why did we forget this? Why did my own hands throw away good bread for years when my great-grandmother's generation would have been horrified? It is not because we are stupid. It is because somewhere along the way someone made a great deal of money convincing us that stale bread is trash and that snacks have to come in a crinkly bag with a cartoon on the front. Every slice of bread you throw away is a slice you paid for and then paid again to replace with a snack. The waste is not an accident. The waste is the business. And once I saw that, I could not unsee it, because it explained the next thing she showed me, which is maybe the most wasteful habit almost every one of us has without ever thinking about it. We throw away seeds. Every time you carve a pumpkin, every time you cut open a squash, every time you eat a melon, you are scraping a free snack straight into the trash and then driving to the store to buy an expensive bag of roasted seeds that came from exactly the same place. I did this for most of my adult life. I would gut a pumpkin in October, throw a wet handful of seeds in the garbage, and 2 aisles over at the grocery store, I would pay $4 or $5 for a little bag of pumpkin seeds. Same seed. I was paying a stranger to do a thing I was actively throwing away with my own hands. The people who lived close to hunger never wasted a seed, because they understood something about seeds that we forgot. A seed is where the plant stores its energy for the next generation. That means a seed is packed with the good stuff, the oils and the protein, the exact things that make a snack filling instead of empty. Pumpkin seeds, squash seeds, even watermelon seeds and sunflower seeds from the garden, all of them roast up into a snack that cost you absolutely nothing because you were about to throw them away. The way I do it now is simple, and I learned the bones of it from the same old wisdom. You rinse the seeds, you get most of the stringy pulp off, and honestly, you do not have to get every bit. You let them dry on a towel, sometimes overnight. Then you toss them with a little salt and the tiniest bit of oil, and you roast them low, around 300 degrees, until they are golden and they smell nutty, turning them so they do not scorch. A single pumpkin gives you a bowl of seeds that would cost you real money at the store, and it cost you nothing but 20 minutes in the heat that was already in your oven. I have friends who spend the whole month of October buying snack seeds and throwing away the exact same seeds from their own jack-o'-lanterns, and when I show them, they cannot believe how much they have quietly wasted over the years. And it is not just the seeds. The old-timers roasted things we do not even think of as food anymore. Watermelon rind, the white part we throw away, they pickled it and candied it and turned it into a snack. Apple peels dried in a low oven become crisp little chips. The point she drilled into me was this. In a poor kitchen, there is no such thing as a scrap. There is only food you have not learned to use yet. Every peel, every seed, every heel of bread is a snack in disguise, waiting for someone who remembers how. But right about now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking, because I thought it too when money was at its very tightest. You are thinking, that is fine, but I do not even have a pumpkin. I do not have spare bread to dry out. I do not have $5 for a jar of kernels this week. Some of you are listening to me right now with almost nothing in the cupboard and a few dollars that have to last until the end of the month. I have been exactly there, standing in a kitchen with more bills than food, and I promise you the next part is built for you, for the person who has almost nothing, because the best trick these old families had cost the least of all. And honestly, that question is what eventually led me to put everything I had learned from her and from years of living close to the bone into a book called Poor Man's Smart. If you want the full system, the one that goes beyond snacks into every corner of a tight budget, That book is described in the description below, and it was built for exactly the person standing in that kitchen with an empty cupboard and a few dollars left. Poor Man Smart lays out the same thinking you are hearing right now, but mapped across every meal, every week, every season, so the knowledge sticks instead of slipping away after one video. Take a look when you are ready, and then come right back with me, because the next thing she showed me made me angry. Let me tell you about potato candy. When I first heard the words, I thought it was a joke or something spoiled people made for fun. It is the opposite. Potato candy came straight out of the Depression, out of kitchens where sugar was rationed and a single potato had to do the work of a whole dessert. And the magic of it is that one small potato, the cheapest food in almost any store, can make a mountain of candy that would fill a whole plate. Here is how it works, and it sounds like a trick because it almost is. You boil one small potato, or you use a couple spoonfuls of leftover plain mashed potato you already have. You mash it smooth with no butter, no milk, nothing. Then, and this is the strange part, you start stirring in powdered sugar a little at a time. The potato has water in it, and as it meets the sugar, that little bit of potato liquefies and dissolves an astonishing amount of sugar. A single tablespoon of mashed potato will drink up cup after cup of powdered sugar and turn into a thick, sweet dough, like a soft white fondant. One potato worth of starch turns into what looks like a bakery's worth of candy. Then you roll that dough out flat, you spread it with peanut butter, and you roll it up like a little log and slice it into pinwheels. What you get looks like something from a candy shop window, little swirls of white and brown, and it costs you a potato, some sugar, and a spoon of peanut butter. Children in the 1930s grew up on this. It stretched a tiny amount of expensive sugar into a treat that felt like plenty, and that was the whole genius of poor cooking. You take the cheapest thing on the shelf, and you make it feel like abundance. I made a batch of this the first winter I was really struggling. When I could not justify buying anything that was purely a treat, I had a couple of potatoes, an old bag of powdered sugar in the back of the cupboard, and a nearly empty jar of peanut butter. That afternoon I made a plate of candy that felt like a small miracle, and it cost me less than $1 for the whole thing. Sitting there eating it, I did not feel poor. I felt like I had gotten away with something, like I had beaten a game that was rigged against me. And that feeling, that is what these tricks really give you. Not just food, dignity. The feeling that you can take care of yourself no matter what your bank account says. And if you do not even have a potato, the old kitchens had you covered too, because the cheapest snack of all is made from nothing but flour, water, and salt. For most of human history, ordinary people made their own crackers, and they were not fancy. Flour, a little fat if you had it, a pinch of salt, enough water to make a stiff dough. You roll it thin, thinner than you think. You cut it into squares. You prick each one with a fork, and you bake them until they are crisp and golden. A bag of flour that costs a few dollars makes crackers again and again and again, hundreds of them, for a fraction of a cent each. When I broke down the cost, homemade crackers came out at pennies for a whole batch, against $3 or $4 for a box at the store that is mostly air and packaging. This is the same knowledge that kept armies and sailors alive for centuries. Hard biscuit, ship's bread, hardtack, it went by many names, but it was always the same idea. Flour and water, baked hard, kept for months, and fed people who had nothing else. The sailors on the old sailing ships lived on it. Soldiers carried it into battle. It was not a treat, it was survival. But the ordinary poor households of the world kept the gentler version of it alive on their kitchen tables long after the rich had moved on to store-bought everything. The knowledge never died. It just got quiet, waiting in old cookbooks and old memories for someone to need it again. And that brings me to the one I promised you at the very beginning, the snack that made me realize just how much we have forgotten. Because everything I have told you so far still needs your oven, still needs a little something. But there is one old snack that needs almost nothing, that keeps for months in your pocket without any refrigeration, and that comes from the oldest hard times wisdom on this whole continent. It is called parched corn, and once I learned it, I understood why it survived for hundreds of years, while everything fancier was forgotten. Parched corn goes back long before the Depression, long before the sailing ships, back to the native peoples of this land who perfected it over generations. The Cherokee and many other nations made it. grinding some of it into a travel food they carried for long journeys. When the settlers came, they learned it too, because it worked. And here is the detail that gave me chills when I found it. In the 1860s, during the Civil War, soldiers on both sides carried parched corn in their pockets and their haversacks when they had nothing else to eat. When the supply wagons could not reach them, when there was no bread and no meat, a man could survive on a handful of parched corn and water. It was written about in soldiers' own letters and diaries. This is not a legend. This is documented, buried in the historical record, a poor man's food that kept human beings alive through the hardest days this country has ever seen. And it is so simple that when I first did it, I laughed out loud in my own kitchen. You take dried corn. You can use the loose popcorn kernels you already have, or whole dried corn if you can find it. You put a heavy dry pan over medium heat, no oil needed, though a tiny bit helps, and you add the corn in a single layer. Then you just stir it and shake it and keep it moving. It does not explode into fluffy popcorn the way you expect. Instead, the kernels toast. They turn golden brown. Some of them crack and swell just a little, and they take on a deep, nutty, roasted flavor, unlike anything in a bag at the store. In about 10 minutes, you have a hard, crunchy, toasted corn snack that you can eat by the handful. The reason this is the secret, the reason I saved it for the end, is what happens next. Parched corn keeps. Because you have driven the moisture out of it, it does not go stale, it does not go soft, it does not spoil the way a snack in a bag does. The old travelers carried it for weeks. You can make a big batch, pour it into a jar, and have a snack ready on your shelf for months, sitting there costing you nothing more, waiting for the night you are standing in front of the cupboard with nothing to reach for. A pound of dried corn costs almost nothing and makes jar after jar of it. And you can eat it plain, or salt it, or the way the old folks did, grind it into a coarse meal, stir a spoonful into hot water with a little sweetener, and drink it down as a warm, filling meal on a cold day. Think about what you are holding now. A snack that fed native families for centuries, that carried soldiers through the 1860s, that a spending culture buried because you cannot make much money selling something a man can make in his own pan from corn that costs pennies. The rich forgot it because they never needed it. The stores never pushed it because there is no profit in it. But the poor households, the people who could not afford to forget, they kept it alive, passed quietly from one hard generation to the next, until it landed with an old woman who taught it to me, and now it lands with you. That is the whole story of every trick in this video. The knowledge existed. Comfort and convenience buried it. Ordinary people who had no choice kept it breathing. And now you have it too. Let me put it all in your hands one more time, plainly, so you can use it this weekend. A jar of popcorn is a week of snacks and a couple of breakfasts for the price of a single bag of chips. The stale bread you were about to throw out is tomorrow's cinnamon toast and a jar of crackers. The seeds you scrape out of a pumpkin or a squash are a bowl of roasted snacks you were paying a stranger for. One potato and some powdered sugar is a whole plate of candy. Flour and water and salt is 100 crackers. And a handful of dried corn in a hot, dry pan is a snack that would have kept a soldier alive, sitting on your shelf for months, ready whenever you need it. Not one of those costs more than pocket change. Every single one of them was invented by people who had less than you have right now. Here's what I want you to really feel before you go. You were never actually poor in the way that matters. You were just missing the knowledge that people like us used to be handed as children, the knowledge that got quietly taken while we were all being taught to reach for a bag and a receipt instead of a pan and a little patience. You did not lose money because you had too little. You lost it because nobody sat you down and showed you what your great-grandparents knew by heart. Tonight, somebody finally did. If you are the kind of person who refuses to waste what you have already paid for, who refuses to be talked into buying back your own scraps at a markup, then you already belong here, because that is exactly who these tricks were made for. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to answer me in the comments, because this audience does not speak up enough and I read every one. Which snack did your own family make when money was tight? Was it popcorn with milk? Was it potato candy? Was it something your grandmother made that I have never even heard of? Tell me the one snack from your childhood that came out of hard times, and tell me where you are watching from. I want to know how far this old knowledge really spread. And if any part of this brought back something you had forgotten or handed you something new, then stay with me and subscribe, because this is not really a channel. It is a group of people quietly reclaiming the survival knowledge that got buried on purpose. There are hundreds of these tricks still out there, waiting. Next time I am going to show you how those same hard times families turned one pot of beans into a whole week of different meals, so nobody at the table ever felt like they were eating the same thing twice. That one saved me more money than almost anything else I know, and I cannot wait to hand it to you. Until then, stop throwing away your seeds, dry out that bread, and put a handful of corn in a hot, dry pan tonight. You will never look at an empty cupboard the same way again. Now here's where this really opens up. Inside the poor man's circle, you get the full Depression-era snack pantry. Every recipe that woman taught me. And if you get stuck, you ask me your own question, and I answer you myself, a real person, not some machine. You won't be doing it alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel any time with one click.